wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And we just want a quick reminder for you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. There's a quick little couple of boxes on that front page, our home page, where you can join up for our weekly newsletter, in which we give you a wrap up with links and blurbs around everything we've published and posted and printed and podcast on in our week, so that you can pick and choose what you are interested in diving more deeply into. And occasionally we'll send you a second email in a week that's about a toolkit, an awakening, an epiphany, or just a musing that either Bridget or myself are going through with our lives or our families. And perhaps our story will resonate with yours. So please jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and join our tribe.
And this week's topic is birth as a portal to consciousness. And it comes off the back of a recent email that I sent, which was motherhood as a portal to consciousness.
Is it an email or a blog?
Oh, sorry, a blog.
I was going to say, because how can everyone read if it was an email? But
yeah, it was a blog, so it's on the website now. But I guess it kind of comes back to that point. I mean, the beginning of motherhood is ultimately, it's a moment of conception and you're carrying your baby, but birth and that bringing the baby earth side is such a profound transformative process for a woman that I can't help thinking, you know, when we look at birth as an opportunity for us to grow and transform, there's just such wisdom to be found there. And also when we look at it from the perspective of there not being any right way to birth, but simply what we can intend upon it and take from it.
Oh, look, that's 100% the way that I see birth. I mean, yes, I'm a pro-natural birth advocate, but however your birth ends up rolling out or has rolled out still has within it the utter perfection of your story. You know, how we talk about our children are perfectly designed to express what we need, that, you know, challenge helps us grow, that we call in experiences that are taking us to our next evolution. Birth is really totally part of that. It is just that the layers of birth run so deep.
And I really love that we're opening up the conversation on this, because there are so many women who both email us or make comment in our tribe around the trauma that they're still carrying around how their birth ended up. So potentially if they've had a intention for a really natural birth and they ended up with, you know, lots of intervention, perhaps they've got like guilt around what their baby did or didn't experience as a result of that, or who they are now showing up as or not showing up as a woman and mother as a result of that. And I think that there's such importance for us to open up this topic and look at the gifts even in the challenge of birth, or the gifts even when birth doesn't go the way you thought it should.
Yeah, I feel such a deep sadness when sadness in that I resonate with the women that are writing these messages, because it's such a, you know, heartfelt, intense situation that they've found themselves in. But when they're carrying this extra layer of guilt and pain and shame and blame even around it, I feel such a sadness, because I feel like no one in this universe has given them the opportunity to actually find the grace and the love in that. And there is, you know, no matter what your story is, there's utter perfection in how that rolled out for you and your child. And don't forget, as you say, Bridget, it's a co-created experience. So, you know, and I know I've touched on before that the birth in itself, have moved through the, you know, there's certain circles that we're looking at purely birth as being a spiritual orgasmic process. And that I think we can harbour a lot of guilt when we're really focused on birth being this one-sided way of being, or the possibility of birth being completely pleasurable, that if our children have experienced any part of trauma, that therefore that's damaging trauma as well. And what I think we often miss is that there is a level of trauma that's necessary in order for them to actually birth. You know, we talk about the compression on the head, which sets off all sorts of neuro pathways and mechanisms to actually jumpstart a body ready for life with gravity and life with breath, and, you know, all of these assaults that happen on a physical body, and all of a sudden these pathways of pressure and compression and stress and the hormones of stress that kickstart that body ready to take its first breath and to be in survival mode, to jumpstart that system. I mean, there's a level of stress and challenge and indeed trauma that is healthy and necessary in order for our human species to survive.
That's it. And, we talk a lot about, our greatest growth happens at the border of support and challenge. And that's true for a baby in utero and a baby during birth as well.
Yes.
And sometimes those greatest challenges, i.e. it might come through the mother. If a mother's really stressed, sometimes those babies are born bigger because they know that they're perceiving that the world outside they need to be on guard for.
More robust for.
And who are we to say that's wrong? Because in fact, perhaps that's creating a really resilient child as a result of that environment. So that there is the purpose to that trauma. It's not there necessarily as a big problem, but rather something to be understood.
Absolutely. And so I just want to put that out there first off, because I think we can banter around this topic of birth trauma too, and feel stuck in that story sometimes. I've certainly been at birth workshops where we're looking at rebirthing or, regressive patterning in children, or, birth trauma that's still residual. I've myself treated children that have stored birth trauma within their bodies. But, all of that ultimately serves a purpose still. So, I think I've said maybe on one of our original birth podcasts, I just remember this one particular baby who had this her mother was just losing the plot because she was crying all of the time and couldn't handle anything on her feet. So onesies, socks, blankets, anything, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately we looked at her birth and the obstetrician had pulled this baby out by its feet. And so there was a level of trauma stored on a physical, cellular level that was still resonating, was too painful even for that child to have touched, right?
Yeah.
So we went through this process of essentially cry listening and releasing the physical aspect of that, and ultimately that baby moved through it. But even in that, where we're saying there's a point at which that is dysfunctional in inverted commas for that mother, so it's creating this child who's more highly stressed, who can't settle, who won't settle, who's creating stress within the family dynamic, who is even to say that in itself is wrong? Like there is potentially perfection in the dynamic of having a highly charged, highly needy child. Who does it call in? Who does it call out? Who does it move through? Even in the design of the dysfunction, there's function, right? So even though we want to judge birth trauma as traumatic and therefore something that we want to eliminate, by the same perspective in applying the toolkit that Bridget and I talked to you about in this podcast in Universal Laws, you do need to take also a step back and see the function in the dysfunction, the service in the dynamic that's been created.
And how is this serving the situation? How is this helping me as opposed to something that we need to change or run from?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly the point, as opposed to running from it. So it's not to say that you have to love everything, right? Because you get to the point, but you have to get to the point of seeing the perfection at play so you can let go of the story of the mess up or the, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong and the guilt. You need to come to a point of gratitude and love for the way that it is, because you can see what it's provided. And then you have the ability and the power, and here's the mastery, right, is to then move that energy into the way that you want it to manifest, as opposed to it being unconsciously manifested.
Yeah.
But you can't get that level of mastery and move it until you get to the point of getting out of your victim story about the blame, the shame, the hard, that's keeping you stuck there, and you see the love and the gratitude that exists in its very function. I'm hoping that's not too heady.
No, and I love that, because I keep thinking back to this idea of, whose belief is it anyway? Because I think back to my first birth, and I was so empowered and loved it so much, and really felt like I'd done an enormous amount of, transformation and fulfillment through that birth. And it was only until I'd started to learn the things that were wrong with it, or that weren't quite natural, that I'd believed were like the pinnacle of natural birth, that I then put this filter on my experience and started to judge it and thought that I should somehow have had a different experience. Once I started to inject the values of other kind of people that I'd put on a pedestal as experts around birth, and it clouded my experience in the way that I was able to see that birth, which is so interesting, because the flip of that also is similarly people who go into a birth really, really, hardcore about the way that they want it to be, and it doesn't go that way, and they feel like they've failed. Well, it's not really failing, rather it's just not living up to perhaps some person, whether it's yourself or somebody else, some person's ideal around how it should have been.
Yeah, it is. I think there's many layers. I mean, Rhea Dempsey calls that subsection of women as the aspirationally naive. So probably, I'm hearing it was you, Bridget. That was me too in my first. I mean, I think I probably put enough choices in place that I didn't fall down the path of intervention. But in this country, in Australia, in Victoria, only 3% of births are natural. 3%. Like, just sit for a minute with how tiny that figure is.
It's not even big enough to actually have a good sample size.
3%.
This is phenomenal.
So your chances of being in that 3% are very minimal. And that's why I'm pretty hardcore, and I know that you are too, Bridget, around creating intention and choice that manifest that 3%. Thinking that you're going to walk in and just kill it because you've got this fantastic, knowledge of your body and you trust your body, and women have birthed in fields for generations. And you love your obstetrician, well, you're just going to rock up and wait and see. You're not in that 3%, hun. No.
But I mean, and the fact is that simply by choosing a hospital birth, the chances are incredibly slim.
They are. Unfortunately, they really are. And that's simply because of the culture that we're being trained in, or our birth professionals are being trained in. And of course, then as they're moving through the ranks of learning and training, the less they see natural birth, which if there's only 3% happening in this country, you're not necessarily going to see much of it, right? You're also going to be very filtered in the way that you view birth, because you see 97% of birth as needing intervention.
It's true. And it's that whole kind of principle around human behaviour, I'll see it when I believe it. Well, unless they believe it's possible to have an intervention-free birth, they're never going to see it because they're never...
No, and they don't build the skill set. That's why we now don't vaginally breech birth.
Yeah.
Because nobody has been trained in it for 15 years.
For decades. They're now starting to bring it back in, but yeah, exactly. There has not been...
You can't have a birth experience where you don't have anyone trained in it. So anyway, we're digressing from the point of this podcast. But I just really want to get into place that we can really start to dissect our births and look at where we sit with our body and our beliefs, and really look at it as birth being a portal of consciousness is really where I sit with it. That no matter how your birth rolled out, there's perfection in that story. There's perfection in what it brings up when you hit a hard spot. There's perfection in the way your relationship dynamic functions within that or doesn't function. There's perfection in how you handle yourself or don't handle yourself when you're hit with any of those bits that don't go quite to plan. Potentially it's the breakdown of the fantasy around how you were going to rock it. And then bang, I didn't realise, because we're so set up in this natural birth culture to work with calm birth or breath work or whatever. And I have subsequently birthed with a lot of second-time calm birthing mums, because if they haven't also had the realistic version of pain and how to handle a pain tolerance, what their pain tolerance is like, and that's physical as well as emotional pain, because you're actually dealing with both. Don't forget, we're stepping into the subconscious in birth. So unless you know what your pain MO is like in how you handle yourself, your relationship, your dynamics, and how you function within that, based on your childhood wounds, your relationship dynamic, the dynamic of the caregivers you've put yourself with, and the environment in which you're birthing, you are going to be rebirthing so many aspects of you, right? You're going to be hit with all of the dysfunction because you are living in the subconscious. So the thing is, all of that, even if it doesn't go the way you thought it would go, when you can have a really fantastic birth debrief, you can see the perfection in what it's brought up for you. No different to, we say, our children reflect what we've repressed, or the way that we, feel a trigger with our 3-year-old and that was us at 3, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Birth is exactly the same. So those points at which you vague out, those points at which it gets really hard, those points at which you go, I can't believe I went that, off the Richter chart, emotional or angry or whatever. I almost don't recognise who I was when I did that. These are all fantastic insights into your neurobiology.
Yeah, and your psyche and everything that you're not looking at, and obviously compelling yourself to look at through the process of birth when you go and debrief like this.
Yes, exactly. So the point in actually having the opportunity to see the perfection in that is to actually draw out your timeline of your birth and write everything down. And then you're able to really look at it and go, oh, what happened at this point? Where did I go there? Oh, that's reflective of this. How did that function? What needs was I trying to get met that I couldn't ask for consciously, and that subconsciously I've created this situation in which I get those needs met, just not the way I thought I would. Not the form I'm looking for, right? But when we're creating things unconsciously, it's never the form we think we want. And the insight that gives into our wounds that need addressing, into our beliefs that are ready to be let go of, into looking at the dynamics at play that currently don't serve us even more, even though we're still running them. Like, there's so much insight and perfection in how that rolled out the way that it did. And just, you know, particularly even the births that don't go to plan, how much did that serve you as a woman? How much did it serve you even in completely rocking your body trust? How much does that serve for where you're at now? Does it equilibrate perhaps the pride you felt in knowing everything about your body and judging those around you who didn't? Does it give you more compassion and empathy to other women, mothers, loved ones who've had not so idyllic experiences? Does it give you more compassion and connection to them? Does it allow you the opportunity to reach such depth that you find the love that you had never recognized in your partnership before? Did it create enormous focus and intention on your baby?
Yeah.
You know, like, there's so much perfection even when it doesn't go to plan. And this is the portal to consciousness, right? I mean, there's so many ways we can get more conscious. There's so many ways we can deal with our shit. And this is just another pathway.
One of the ways. And I love it because the opportunity that's lost when it all goes perfectly to plan is that you don't get broken open by your birth. And when you get broken open by your birth, you are transformed. You are forced to face these parts of yourself that you perhaps didn't want to face.
Yeah. Look, look, I'm in two minds about that, Bridge. I totally get what you're saying, that our greatest awakenings happen at our greatest breakings. But also, having had incredibly profound birth experiences, I also see what they opened me up to that wasn't through cracking.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so when I've had birth experiences that I've had that have been profound and incredible and soulful, it's because I've cracked myself open in pregnancy.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. So there's no way to consciousness without cracking yourself open, and so you're either doing it intentionally through the pregnancy journey, which is probably like a narrow percentage of women would do, or you're being taken to that place through birth.
Yes,
potentially.
I would agree with that. And then, so by the time I get to birth, I have a toolkit and a team around me that's perfectly resourced for what's come up, right? What I know is lingering in my subconscious. And beyond that, I've already peeled back layers, which allows me to access this greater sense of gratitude and peace. And the birth experiences then take me to this soaring level of love and awakening, you know, like the best meditation you could ever go on, and spiritual, like, oneness experience, which I think ultimately still serves, because you come on the other side of that just full of love, immense gratitude for what is possible within our human form that we have access to only in these moments of fine veiling between the worlds, you know. For
the mother who's pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant, what does that work look like in pregnancy? You know, what are a couple of things that is an example of the cracking yourself open during pregnancy?
Yeah, look, I do think it's what you and I talk about, even just through this podcast and through our courses. I mean, you are still the woman who knows that she's entering this, you know, D-Day of walking into her subconscious. And I guess I take that very seriously, in that I want to be as prepared as I can be for that. So what is the work that I know is already not working in my life right now? So where is there dysfunction in my relationship? Where am I holding on to guilt or judgment? So that can be judgment on myself, or that can be judgment on other women around me, because it's all a reflective mirror, right? So if I'm judging that woman's birth or experience, or you know, any of the above, then that's a call into me to go, okay, what is it that I'm not seeing? What's the other side? Where's the gratitude? Where's the da-da-da-da-da? And of course, there's the physical manifestations in pregnancy. So anytime we're dealing with our babies being in a difficult position, coming up against or rubbing up against physical manifestations in pregnancy. So, you know, any of your normal warning signs of dis-ease or illness or dysfunction within our physical body. Each of those, of course, has a mental emotional link. And why is that there, and why is it manifesting, and how does it form? So I think it's doing the work that you and I talk about all of the time, just in terms of being a conscious woman, knowing she's headed for this road of transformation, right? It's kind of, let's get this shit sorted now so I don't need to be sideswept by it later.
Yeah.
And then on the practical side, no different to our birth podcasts that we did, I think we just called them Birth 1 and 2 or something, didn't we?
Birth Part 1 and 2, yeah.
Yeah. Which is near the beginning of our podcast, is to get really serious about your choices. That, you know, I'm not even lightheartedly saying that.
Yeah, go back and listen, because there is no lightheartedness.
There's no lightheartedness. No, I know. I know there's not.
Yeah.
And I had this beautiful mum at school come up to the other day, and she's a new mum. I don't know her at all. And she goes, you know, she's had 2 seasons. She was looking at I've actually met 2 feedback women in this week, actually, which is quite funny. I'm mixing their stories up. Either way, both of them said to me, I'm just going to go to hospital and have a VBAC. And I went, like, have you researched anything? Do you know your options? No, I thought I'd just go. They said I could do it.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, well, you probably want to start looking around, right? You want to be looking at your statistics. So whatever birth you're seeking, if it particularly sits on a fringe of comfort zone for a medical model, which certainly VBAC fits into, where are you going to get the best outcome? Because all hospitals, all obstetricians, all midwives have their own birth outcome statistics. From, you know, natural birth through to levels of intervention, through to success rates of vaginal or transfer to Caesar or whatever the case may be. They all have statistics. So if you're after a particular birth, you kind of want to pick the person and the place that has the best statistic outcome for you.
Yeah.
So VBAC in home birth has an 89% success rate.
Yeah.
VBAC in a Melbourne hospital has a 7 to 11% success rate.
VBAC in a private hospital has about a 2% success rate, I'm
right.
sure. Yeah.
So the thing is, you really want a resource, because anyone can say, it's like any school can say, no, we suit the individual, of course your child will be
we're
great
all about
here.
the whole child, yeah.
Same thing in birth. Any hospital will say, yeah, whatever you want. But ultimately, they're all run by policies and procedures which largely they don't tell you about, which you need to be savvy about and know. So you can, and I said to this woman, you can do anything you want to do as long as you know exactly what their policies and procedures and guidelines are. You know exactly what you will and won't do, and you'll advocate around those for yourself. And you're willing to have all of those conversations in your pregnancy before you get to birth. There is no point in your head going, oh, well, I'm just not going to do that, and this is the type of birth I want, and here's how I'm going to go about it. And then not be willing to balls up enough to actually have those tough conversations and potentially conflict, and certainly get in writing what you're allowed, in inverted commas, or have agreed to with those care providers, so that it's in the birth plan when you get there. You can't spring it on anyone at the birth, because that creates such enormous conflict and stress within your body that I don't know what baby is really flying out of there in a open way. So I am very, very big on own your choices.
And how did those two women take that? Were they a bit deer in the headlights, or?
Yeah, they were, but then they were like, oh, I didn't even know. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm having a natural birth, right, with no history of anything, so I'm not even on the fringe here.
Yeah.
And I know that when I step foot in that hospital, I've got 6 hours to birth my baby. They want to admit you at 4 centimetres, and they give you 1 hour to dilate 1 centimetre over the course of 6 hours before they say, this is now not working. I have never met a first-time mum. Not never, I don't want to say never. It's exceptionally rare to meet a first-time mum who can dilate 1 centimetre an hour and have her baby within 6 hours. But, you know, this is the climate we're birthing in.
Yeah.
So you really have to know what those policies, procedures, protocols, timelines are that are in place legally and, you know, based on avoiding litigation through those hospital systems. and know that you are resourcing yourself enough to work around those, to be able to mediate the type of birth that you're after. And certainly having a birth advocate outside of the hospital system is ideal. So an independent midwife or a doula who you can bounce that off of, who you already have an awareness of options, who a continuity of care because you know that same person through that whole process, as opposed to shift changes and da-da-da. Anyway, I'm not going to rehash birth parts 1 and 2, but certainly listen to those podcasts if you want to go back through my hardcore refresher on that. I know I was pretty like... But, you know, this is the thing that I don't think also as women we take enough responsibility for our advocacy in birth. And that ultimately, yes, all birth is perfect in a portal of consciousness, but on a purely practical level, you could line up all of the births that any of us have had and whittle it down to a series of choices, and you will see the choices that end in 3% natural birth, and you will see a common set of choices that don't.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
And I take that really seriously. So, depending on what you're willing to look at in pregnancy and how empowered and full of your own voice you are willing to be, how much are you willing to step up for you and your baby in pregnancy?
And this is the key part to consciousness, because so many women, you know, as girls, we are... You know, what is revered is the good girl who listens, who does what she's told, who, you know, waits her turn, all of those things. And,
of course.
And advocating for yourself in birth is busting all of that. Yes. It's busting all of the well-meaningness of others to actually advocate for yourself and your baby and what you ultimately want in a system that's generally not set up for the welfare of the individual woman. It's for the welfare of the broader system working.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is no different to any workplace, and we completely understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is your once in a lifetime. This is not your everyday. So you absolutely have room to move when you're willing to understand your choices and you are willing to advocate for yourself within those. And
so that's just having a curiosity, I think, in terms of any discomfort or uncertainty that comes up within you around, oh, but like surely my obstetrician knows best for me, or, you know, the assumptions that you start to have around the people around you and their best interests. It's about getting clear on, okay, they've put recommendations, but ultimately only you decide what's happening with your own body. Yeah. And it's creating that strong enough sense of voice for yourself and sense of advocacy for yourself that you are willing to be heard, you know, when the going gets tough, or, you know, even before that, ideally, so that you're not having to get to the point of conflict before something transforms.
Have we even talked about that obstetrician appointment that I had? Did we even talk about that?
No, we should talk about it. I don't think we have. Let's talk about that
yeah,
appointment.
Well, this actually highlights it perfectly, right? So as you know, I've come from always hired an independent midwife and doula to be with me. My first birth, we went to Monash, which is like a really, was a natural birthing hospital, now is totally... tertiary level high care kind of space, but back then they had a birth centre,
yeah,
and that's where I went, and largely was there for 20 minutes just to have my baby on the bed and thought it was ridiculous. So then I had my next 2 were home births, and this time around, my last home birth nobody made it to, and so this time around I decided that we would just go through the public system, because having had the experiences that I have had and particularly my last one when we completely did it on our own, I thought I can do this in a system that I think can still work for me, and see how that goes. This is my first foray into the public system, which has been a really big eye-opener, because it's a completely different experience to a home birth where you're just loved up and adored, and the midwives come to you and you have these hour-long chats and conversations and, you know, gorgeousness, to they can't even fit me in for an appointment at the hospital. So it's been a really, really interesting journey for me to witness what that is, and I've had to face lots of fear around intervention, because I certainly have always been a fringe dweller, I suppose, and sceptical of medical establishments, and here I was placing myself in it, and honestly it was a financial decision based on the fact that last time I still paid a full home birthing fee even though no one made it, and we decided this time we've got a bigger family, bigger budget, if I can get away with having an amazing birth, not there. That's our choice. So that's kind of our economic choice behind this. If it was legitimately not an economic choice, I'd still be having home birth, because nothing beats it. It's extraordinary. But, you know, I think that's still part of our right to birth in this country that's not met. it's not a choice if you're financially cut out of that as being a choice, which I think is a real shame in this birthing climate. But anyway, side political issue. So I wanted to get in with the team midwifery care, which is a smaller group of midwives, and essentially you get to know, hopefully, some midwives more intimately. That has not been my experience, but that's the idea behind team midwifery care. The team midwives also tend to have generally a philosophy that's more around natural birth than around how to fix problems. So I was picking a particular stream of midwifery within a hospital setting. To get into that, you have to be ticked off by an obstetrician within the hospital that says, all right, you're low risk, you're low da-da-da-da, will allow you into this program. So this was my first foray into the hospital, was meeting with this obstetrician, and I was dreading it. Like, everything that was in my body, I was like, oh my God, I so don't want to be here, like, dreading it. And I remember sitting in the waiting room of the hospital, and I remember looking down at my belly and just, you know, thinking to myself, all right, I'm here. Universe, you just have to tell me which way this is going, because I'm almost at the point of backing out. Like, you know, this is like, maybe it's worth spending this home birthing money, because that's how badly I don't want to be in the system.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I rocked up to this obstetrician and I opened the door, and she's this gorgeous, I reckon 60-something, looks like an old school midwife obstetrician. And I was like, and so I kind of walked in, which was really different. And she said to me, well, you're really interesting. And I said, am I? And she goes, why have you had births at home? And I said, well, you know, blah, blah, this is my story and I chose it. It wasn't like, whoops, the baby happened at home. It was, you know, I planned home births. And so we had a chat about that, and she has these posters up in her room around kangaroo care and breastfeeding and blah, blah, blah. So I was already looking around the room thinking, all right, I actually think she's more like my peeps than...
She's okay.
I think we're going to be okay here. Anyway, did the basic checks, and I explained to her the type of birth I was looking for. And that I was and I said, I'm genuinely scared about being in a system, because I know the intervention cascade, I know the timelines, I know the policies and procedures I'm walking into, and I'm genuinely scared about that. And she was so beautiful. Like, okay, she's an obstetrician in this hospital. And she turned around to me and she said, you know, sometimes the choices and the policies that are put in place in a hospital are not for the mother's best interests. They're for the hospital's. And she said, so you have to have a birth plan, and you have to be willing to advocate for yourself, and then you'll be fine. And I was just like...
Do you want to kiss her?
I think I probably I probably, you know, etherically kissed her.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking in my head, man, like, I have never heard those words out of an obstetrician's mouth.
Yeah.
In all the years I've been a doula. Like, in all the years. I know that's the truth.
Yes.
But no one on such a medical establishment has ever said that to me before.
Yeah.
And I was just like, all right, universe, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Like, all right.
We've got this.
We're okay. And we walked out of there, and anyway, blah, blah, blah. She was just the most fabulous experience for me. And I just was also equally saddened, because I'm pretty birth savvy, I'm pretty empowered, I'm pretty ready to advocate for myself. And there are three things that not a lot of women in this birthing climate are able to do or be for themselves. And it's those women that need to hear that. I mean, it's great for me to hear it, but no one's hearing that, right? Because they're not walking in going, I understand this system.
Yeah.
And here's what I still want to be able to do. Like, I just thought, I wish all of you beautiful listeners could pass on this story and just go, we know this is the deal, right? That the policies and the procedures, and therefore often the choices that are made in birth that override your birth choices, are not necessarily in your best interests. They're because they're governed by litigation. and they're governed by timelines.
And a business that's being run as well. I mean, that was one of the things that they even said to me when I was induced with Sylvie was, actually, you're going to get a better chance of people getting off your back if you birth at night because no one's paying as much attention. Whereas in the day, they've got like, you know, women coming in all the time, and, you know, they've got to move you fast, so you're going to more likely be pushed. You're under the pump. You know, this natural process.
Which even in itself is fascinating, isn't it? So they're not even looking at changing your intervention or what they require is done in your birth case. They're saying literally your outcome will change based on whether you birth during the day or at night.
Yeah, which is just madness. But then I'm like, okay, thank you for that piece of information. I know when I want to be induced. Then I'll be induced now, and you know we'll have a negotiation about what that looks like, which we did.
Yes,
but. Yeah, and I mean, I wrote the Flip Your Birth piece. That we've got a product on our website called Flip Your Birth for the case of the woman who has a plan, like I did, to have a home birth and ends up with that not going to plan. Who ends up in hospital. And how to transform what you think is totally in the way of what you want to achieve and how it's actually on the way for you. And you know, I thought that I was going to be so empowered to have this home birth and, you know, in control and all of those things. But ultimately, the power and control to a degree that I was able to have in my hospital birth, because I knew the system, because I knew my options within that system, was really, like, profound for me, because I was able to feel heard. I was able to negotiate the outcomes that I wanted. I didn't feel pushed. You know, and I also recognised the choice that I was making by saying yes to being in there, because I certainly could have said, look, no, I don't want to, like you, and they would have been on my back, potentially, but it was still a choice of mine to say, no, I'm going to ignore the test results and we're going to keep with our plan to home birth. But ultimately, I knew myself enough to know that, okay, I'm at this point now, this is the road I'm going to go down, but I'm going to go down it on the terms that are mine as much as possible. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a birth that I felt empowered by, and it didn't look the way I thought it was going to look, but it still was an empowered birth, and it still was a story that continues to get shared and help other women 9 months down the track. Because unfortunately, this is the case where so many of us find ourselves, is potentially on that cusp of disempowerment, when in fact we have the tools at our disposal, if we ask the right questions, to turn that into a story of empowerment and a story of growth and transformation, and a story full of wisdom when we can know where to look for it. So I really invite you to go back and have a look at those earlier birth podcasts, Births Part 1 and 2, because that's the really practical deep dive into the knowledge around birth and Julie's incredible wisdom around empowering your birth outcome. And if you do have a story that you're not, grateful for yet in terms of the birth experience that you've had, then I really, really invite you to go onto the website under products and have a look at the Flip Your Birth download, because that was a really powerful set of questions.
I was going to say, it's a genius set of questions.
It was a set of questions, just so people have the background, that I devised, I guess, for myself when I was sitting in the hospital. It was about like 4 a.m. and I was up, and I knew I was going to be induced with Sylvie later that day, and I knew like how much getting myself congruent with the choice that I was making to do that would really help the both of us, and really help my body follow suit, because I needed to do some my cervix. Well, they have such wonderful terms, don't they? My cervix wasn't optimum, and there was just some stuff with my body that wasn't quite lining up for the induction to work very well, and I wanted to do as much of that myself as possible with as minimal intervention. And so I really worked on my mindset, and I really worked on transforming my resistance to where I had found myself. I worked to break down the belief that there was anything inherently wrong with induction. So I had to look at the benefits of not going into spontaneous labour, and the benefits to my baby and the benefits to me of that, and how we could recover from that, and how it was helping us as opposed to hindering us, because I'd had, a very strong belief system about undisturbed birth, and I was now going to be disturbing the natural process. And I continued to ask myself those questions, and sort of journaled and looked at the benefits and all of that kind of stuff, to the point at which I had like this tear of gratitude and like incredible movement within my whole body that almost felt like I'd kind of been lit up, because I knew then that I was released from that limited thinking that I'd had, and my body, totally came into came into alignment that day, and I had like a very low dose Syntocin and had Sylvie that night or early the next morning. So it was a really powerful process to take myself through, and allowed me to show up a lot more fully than I think I could have otherwise. It allowed me to stand in the situation as opposed to resist the situation, which I really wanted to do for myself and for her. So I really invite you to have a look at that product. And to deep dive into these principles more, really the place to go is our Loathing to Loving program, which has just started a new live round this week. And that's really where we talk a lot about these universal concepts. We talk a lot about trying to find the wisdom in the challenges, to look at benefits and drawbacks, and really unpacking belief systems to create freedom for ourselves beyond the limited thinking that we might have on a topic.
Which is what we're talking about doing in both debriefing your birth and also in preparation for birth, to bring yourself as fully online and out of running your subconscious story as is possible, to actually have a toolkit and a tribe to coach you through it. So you have specific things that come up. You also then get access to us and all of the other women in that tribe with you that, really help, peel back those layers with you.
It's really powerful, and we love these live rounds because they take us right back into it. And it's going to be so interesting for Jules, on the cusp of having another baby and really getting to be taken into that place.
I'm really looking forward to it, actually. I was saying that to a friend the other day. So this is kind of the last course as a kind of, steadily descent into birth. And I was like, I'm really, it just almost, I know it's in inverted commas work, but it totally, I love it. I love the online conversations. I love pulling apart the stories and the coaching on the webinars, and it actually feels like a really nourishing descent as opposed to feeling like hard work, because it's so, I just get so high on witnessing other women have breakthroughs and just on discussions that challenge the social norm and, looking at who we are beyond who we think we are. I just adore all of that.
It's really, really awesome.
Yeah, so definitely have a look at our Loathing to Loving program. It's not too late for you to jump on if you do want to join us. It is lifetime access, and we do run 3 live rounds a year, and you can join as many as you like. We have women this time around who are jumping in for the 3rd time because they've got each time a new layer or a new question or a new problem that they just want to workshop through. So you certainly get access to being able to do that. I do really wish that you can sit really wholeheartedly in your body at some point about your birth and just feel into the love that existed in that and with that and around that, and that if you can't manage that on your own, that you do seek additional help in which to really get to that point, because it's pretty profound as a setup for motherhood and womanhood to come into a place of extreme alignment and gratitude and thankfulness for the experience that cracked you open as a mother. So I really do wish that you have the opportunity in your lifetime to do that.
Yeah, beautiful. So to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And for me, it's suburbansandcastles.com. And to connect with us, it's nourishingthemother.com.au. Hop on there and read our latest blogs, have a look at some of the products we've got. We'd love you to also write us a review if you can on Facebook or on iTunes, because we love to read those. It's really, really inspiring and keeps us motivated to come up with new concepts and ideas and inspiration for you each week.
And do email us or Facebook message us if you've got a specific questions that you'd like us to dive into.
Yeah, we'd love it.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.